What's up, you guys? My name is Aubrey and this is my channel, and today we're going to be talking about stimulus checks, and I'm going to be giving you guys an update on this third most recent stimulus check that we received a couple of months ago. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down in what cases you may have not received a stimulus check, what you need to do if you're one of the people that has not received one, and what to expect over the next couple of months. So let's get started. So it has now been about 6 weeks since we received the most recent $1,400 stimulus check. This was the largest of all 3 stimulus checks that were distributed throughout this pandemic. Now, one relatively unique thing about this stimulus check versus the last 2 that we received is the amount of time in which the government has to send out these checks. You guys may remember that in December and January, with that second $600 stimulus check, there was a very tight time frame. The IRS was given about 2 weeks to send out all of the checks, in some cases 3 weeks, all of the checks, and if those checks were not distributed in that time frame, then it was cut off. And from then on out, the only way to receive your check was through a recovery rebate when filing your taxes. This is actually quite a bit different in this third round. In fact, the IRS has the entire year to send out these $1,400 stimulus checks. So unlike the last 2 rounds, where if you did not get a stimulus check within the first couple of weeks, that was a pretty surefire sign that something was wrong with your check, that you probably would have to claim it through your taxes rather than by getting a physical check. But that is not the case this time around, and theoretically it could be August, September, even November or December of 2021, and you could then at that point receive your 2021 $1,400 stimulus check. So that is a pretty big change compared to the last 2 checks. And the reason why I wanted to state that is because of the fact that there is a chance that you may not receive your check anytime soon, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to receive it. And you could theoretically receive your checks 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the line. There is not a strict time frame this time around compared to the last 2 checks. Now, on that same note, let's talk about some of the updated facts and figures regarding this third $1,400 stimulus check. So there has been about 5 different batches of payments that have been sent out between mid-March and currently in April. And of that, the very first batch of payments were sent out March 17th. On that date, 90 million payments were made via direct deposit. That totaled out to $242 billion, and 150,000 checks were sent out, so physical checks, and that valued to $442 million. On March 24th, a second batch of payments were made, and of that second batch, 17 million payments were made via direct deposit. That had a total value of about $38 billion. 15 million checks were sent out via paper check, which had a value at about $34 billion, and 5 million payments were made to EIP cards, which had a value at about $11 billion. There was a third payment that was made on April 3rd, and that included 2 million direct deposits totaled at $5 billion, and the same amount was made via paper checks as well, so 4 million total payments valued out to $10 billion on April 3rd. The fourth payment was made shortly after that on April 7th, and of that, 24 million payments were made via direct deposit, totaling out to $33 billion. 1 million paper checks were sent out, totaling out to about $3 billion. And on April 7th, with this fourth batch of payments, that's whenever the government started distributing plus-up payments. And on this day, 1 million plus-up payments were distributed, which had a value of about $2 million. Now, what plus-up payments are? Plus-up payments are payments that the government owes you because they did not give you the correct original amount. Plus-up payments are not being distributed as of now for the first and second check, only for the third check. So theoretically, let's say that you're somebody who qualified for the full $1,400 stimulus check that started being distributed last month. But for whatever reason, you didn't get that full amount and you only received, let's say, $1,000. Well, in this case, you are eligible for the full $1,400. So you should, at some point, if you haven't already, receive a plus-up payment of that additional amount, of the difference of what you received versus what you were owed. That is what a plus-up payment is. Now, in order to decide and to figure out how much you could be eligible for a plus-up payment, you need to first calculate how much you were eligible for, and you have to know how much you actually received. And your plus-up payment would be the difference between those two. It is important to note, though, that just because you received less than $1,400 does not necessarily mean that you qualify and you are eligible for a plus-up payment. In some cases, you receive less than the $1,400 for a valid and legitimate reason, and in that case, you would not receive a plus-up payment. So it is important for you to understand what you're owed, what you received, and then the difference of that in some cases will come to you in the form of a plus-up payment. But plus-up payments started being distributed on April 7th for the first time. The fifth and the most recent payment batch was distributed on April 14th, and that included $1.2 million in direct deposit payments, which has a value of about $2 billion. It included 800,000 direct checks being sent out, which had a value of $1.4 billion. It also included about 700,000 plus-up payments, which totaled out in this fifth round to be about $1.2 billion. Now, this disbursement schedule, this disbursement pattern that we've been seeing taking place between March 17th and current present day, this will continue throughout the end of the year. Probably not on a weekly basis, but we will see periodic payments being made out to individuals from the IRS between now until December 31st, which is the deadline that the IRS has been given. So if you're somebody that has not received a stimulus check, it doesn't mean you're not getting one. It just means that you may have to be a bit patient. But then that begs the question of what happens if you're somebody that has not received a stimulus check, and how do you know if you're somebody that will receive one versus somebody that will not receive one, and how do you know if you should just wait it out or if you need to start the process of claiming that stimulus check? Now, there are a handful of different reasons as to why you may not get a stimulus check or why you may get one delayed. Number one is the amount of money that you made. There is a chance that depending on how much you made in 2020, you may not be eligible for any stimulus check. And if that's the case, then you shouldn't expect to get a check at all, because there is clear income thresholds that need to be met in order to be eligible for the stimulus check. And if you pass those thresholds, then you will not receive any stimulus check. Additionally, if you're somebody that made more in 2019 than you did in 2020, that could potentially affect your stimulus check eligibility. And that's why it's so incredibly important to file your taxes and get that submitted into the IRS. That way, the IRS can pull your tax return and base your eligibility off new and current data rather than old 2019 data. So if you're somebody who has recently in the last couple of days filed your 2020 tax returns, there is a chance that you did not originally receive a stimulus check because of your 2019 returns, but once you get those 2020 returns in, you will receive a plus-up payment for the difference. This is why it is so incredibly important to get those taxes filed as quickly as possible. Another reason as to why you may have not received your stimulus check so far is because you may have not filed your taxes because you are traditionally a non-filer. And that's where it is incredibly important to get those tax returns filed, even if you're somebody who has traditionally not filed a tax return. Another reason as to why you may have not received a stimulus check is if you're somebody who owes on child support or potentially if you owe debt. In fact, it is possible for this third stimulus check to be garnished by debt collectors. So if you're somebody that has a lot of debt, there is a chance that that stimulus check was garnished, and that's why you never received it. Now, a good way to check and see if this case applies to you is to figure out what debtors you have and potentially even calling them and asking if your stimulus check was garnished. Also, looking at updated debt reports and how much you owe to certain debtors could also provide some clarity on whether or not a stimulus check that you were owed was garnished by a debt collector. But that is certainly a possibility for somebody that meets the requirements for a stimulus check, but you never received one. Honestly, though, you guys, the fact is stimulus checks are not as clear-cut as you would think that they would be. And there are a lot of instances that make stimulus checks and eligibility behind them a bit blurry. Depending on how many kids you have, when those kids were born, how much you made in 2019, how much you made in 2020, what your financial situation is, if you have any debt, all of these things can affect whether or not you receive a stimulus check. And if you're somebody who thinks you are eligible for one, but you didn't receive one, it's really important to figure out how much you're exactly owed so that you can hold the IRS and the government accountable in giving you that plus-up payment, either in the form of a plus-up payment, which could come this year, or in the form of a recovery rebate next year in 2022 while filing your taxes. The fact, though, is there is a lot of nuance to all of this, and it is sometimes very confusing. But what I encourage you to do is I encourage you to sit down and try to figure out how much you're actually owed, and then compare that to how much you actually received. That will be the first step in trying to figure out what you need to do in order to claim your full stimulus check. But like always, you guys, I hope that you found this video informative. I understand that for some people, the stimulus check isn't a big deal, but for others, this stimulus check can be the difference between being able to pay your bills and not being able to pay your bills. And it definitely is disappointing and frustrating whenever you are counting on a stimulus check that you never receive. If you guys have any questions, comments, or if you have anything to add, then make sure to leave a comment down below. I will be doing a FAQ video in the coming days or within the next week or so. So if you have any questions that you want addressed, then make sure to leave a comment in the comment section down below, and I will include it in that video. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell. And I will see you guys in the next video.